Hey guys, tonight we drift into a world where wind isn't just weather, it's divine. You're standing in the early morning of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, with sunlight barely stretching across the canals. A chill breeze curls around your ankles, bringing with it the soft rustle of reeds, the flapping of banners, and something else, something whispering. Is it just the wind, or is it Ihekatl, the god of the wind himself, blowing gently past your ear with a message you'll never quite understand? You wrap your woven cloak a little tighter. It's cool, but not cold. That breeze is always there, always shifting. People around you don't seem to notice it much, unless it's blowing the wrong way. Then they pause. They look up at the sky. They murmur. You're starting to get the feeling that in this place even the smallest gust means something. You pass a woman sprinkling maize flour in a slow spiral at the doorstep of her stall. She's not just making breakfast, she's making an offering. The wind must be appeased. Ihekatl, after all, isn't just a breeze bringer. He's a god with mood swings. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and feel free to post your location and what time you're listening. I always love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you stroll the causeways, the city seems to float on water. Chinampas, those engineered islands, are thick with vegetables and flowers, but your path is drier, cobbled, worn by countless feet, especially those of the Pashtika, the merchant class of the empire. Their trade routes stretch far beyond what the average citizen sees. They return with turquoise from the north, cocoa beans from the south, jaguar pelts from the forests, and always stories. But even they don't take wind lightly. The Pashtika know better than most how to read the air. They've seen what happens when a Ihekatl is offended. That's why no one whistles casually here. Not even children. A stray whistle could mimic the god's breath, and you really don't want him thinking you're mocking him. There's an old superstition. If Ihekatl hears a false wind, he might send a real one, strong enough to scatter your family's maize crop or tip your canoe in the middle of a canal. Historians still argue whether this aversion to whistling was religious, practical, or simply one of those deeply embedded taboos that no one dares to question. But one thing's clear. You're not about to pucker your lips here. You pass through the central marketplace. Early vendors are just arriving. They hang bunches of dried chili, stack baskets of beans, arrange glossy black obsidian blades with ceremonial care. But the real activity is in the murmurs. There's gossip, of course. Some about politics, some about weather. A few heads turn skyward again as another breeze ruffles a thatch roof. It's not strong, but it's sharp cold, like something that just arrived from somewhere else. You catch a word, Ihekatl. It's hard to explain what the wind god means to these people. He's not flashy like Huitzilopochtli, the god of war. He doesn't demand as much blood. He's not even particularly loud. But he moves, always moving, always entering places uninvited. The temples don't even have doors for him. Just open spaces he can drift through at will. He is the one who clears the path for rain, for gods, for people, and sometimes the one who clears away people too. There's an eerie instrument you'll soon hear about, the Aztec death whistle, but not yet. For now, it's just the wind, and it curls in circles at your ankles. A man passes you, carrying a pack woven tight with goods. He has the soft sandals of a Pashtika and the unreadable expression of someone who's walked for days. He's humming quietly, tunelessly. Not whistling, never whistling. The gods might be listening. It's said Ihekatl doesn't just bring wind. He is the wind. He's in every breath of air that sways a tree or rustles a cloak. That makes him both everywhere and impossible to pin down. And maybe that's why the Aztecs treated him with such careful reverence. You can't fight what you can't see. But maybe, just maybe, if you walk softly, if you keep your voice low, If you honor the breeze with a few grains of maize or a song sung into the wind, he'll pass you by. Or if you're lucky, he'll guide your sails, fill your lungs, and help you get where you need to go without scattering your market goods. Halfway across a muddy road, the sun climbs higher. Vendors call softly, avoiding sharp tones. The breeze lifts again, and this time, it carries something odd, faint, melodic. A single note high-pitched, almost like a scream, but too distant to alarm. Just enough to make you pause. You turn toward the sound, but there's nothing there. You turn back toward the marketplace, but that faint sound lingers in your ears. Was it just a bird? Maybe a child squealing? Or maybe one of those whistles? You walk a little slower now, each step crunching gently on packed earth. As the city awakens, Tenochtitlan stretches before you like a living mosaic. Canals, like watery veins, stone buildings like bone, and people moving like blood through the body of a restless, sacred place. The air tastes different here, thin, dry, and high, and always the wind runs ahead of you, like a child too excited to wait. So, who exactly is the wind god you're not supposed to annoy? His name is Icatal. And unlike some of the other gods who prefer booming declarations, roaring fires, or, well, rivers of blood, Icatal is courteous. Oddly so. He's a gentle deity, at least by Aztec standards. He doesn't demand the hearts of warriors or the heads of nobles. He wants breath, air, movement. And oddly enough, cleanliness. According to many versions of the myth, Ihicatil wears a beak-like mask that covers his lower face, not unlike a modern plague doctor, but far more fashionable. Red paint, feathers, polished obsidian accents, and underneath that mask, some legends say it's to hide his breath, which is divine and pure. Others say it's modesty. Ihicatil, in a pantheon of drama queens and battle fanatics, is shy. Historians still debate whether Ihicatil began as a separate god, or as an aspect of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, who walked among mortals. It gets tangled, as Aztec mythology often does. Ihicatil Quetzalcoatl, as he's often called, blends wind and wisdom, movement and mercy, which is lovely, unless you're trying to make an offering and aren't sure which name to use. The Aztecs solved this the practical way. They offered to both. Can't hurt. The temples built for Ihicatil were round, unlike the square pyramids dedicated to other deities. Round, they believed, was better for wind to move through. No sharp corners, no trapped gusts. Just easy entry and exit, because gods don't knock. And Ihicatil, most especially, doesn't wait for an invitation. You're starting to get the picture, aren't you? Ihicatil is everywhere and nowhere. He opens doors. Literally. There's a legend that before the rain god Tlaloc can bring life-giving rain to the fields, Ihicatil must first blow open the gates of the sky. In that sense, Ihicatil is the key to life. But gods, as we know, tend to be unpredictable. There's an old account of a temple whose doors would creak open late at night with no one near. No guards, no priests, just a sudden rush of air, followed by silence. Some called it Ihicatil, passing through, checking on things. Others called it a sign to stay indoors. You pass a small shrine now, built at the edge of a causeway, just a few stones and a fan of feathers, weighed down with river pebbles. An offering, likely left by a merchant preparing to leave the city. Merchants, especially the Pachateca, never skip these rituals. Why? Because if the wind turned against them, if their canoes capsized, or if strong gales delayed their trade routes, ruin could follow. And no one wanted to return to Tenochtitlan empty-handed. There's a fringe belief, even today, that Ihicatil doesn't just move weather, he moves fate. He stirs emotion. He whispers doubts. He changes the course of a decision, ever so slightly, like nudging a leaf from one side of the canal to the other, which might explain why people talk to the wind here, just softly, as if he were always listening. And maybe he is. You spot a child tugging at their mother's sleeve, pointing up at a kite-like banner flapping overhead. It spins in the wind, threads unraveling into little tassels. The mother hushes them gently, then taps the child on the lips. Not now, no whistling, not under that sky. Even the animals seem to understand. A dog at the marketplace perimeter lifts its head, sniffs, and backs away into a shaded alley. The breeze carries the scent of roasted maize, damp feathers, and something else, anticipation. Icatl's breath, perhaps. Of course, Icatl's presence wasn't just symbolic. He was woven into rituals, especially those marking beginnings, new seasons, new construction, new trade routes. You didn't build a canal without asking his permission. You didn't set off for far lands without a whispered prayer. And then there were the whistles. We're getting close, but not yet. First, let's pause here. Beside this round temple, its stone polished by centuries of air, you sit for a moment on its edge. The stone is warm from the sun. The wind dances by. A banner ripples gently. Somewhere faintly, you hear that note again. A thin, hollow whistle, like air being sucked through bone. You tilt your head. Maybe it's just the wind. Or maybe someone somewhere is about to make an offering and wants a Hecatl to hear them. You rise slowly from the warm stone ledge, brushing your hand across the surface. The temple's round walls feel strangely aerodynamic, as if built by someone who understood that the wind prefers curves. No corners, no resistance, just endless movement, like the god it honors. You're not alone now. A small procession approaches, quiet as the breeze itself. 4 Pachtika merchants walk in a staggered line, cloaked in dusty cotton, each with a pack that clinks softly with the sound of shell, stone, and cacao beans. They don't talk. They don't need to. You can read the story in the lines of their faces, the gentle pressure of their footfalls, the way they pause at the temple door, not out of exhaustion but reverence. The lead merchant bends, drawing something from his satchel, a bundle of feathers, a bit of maize, a small obsidian mirror, no bigger than your palm. These are not casual gifts. Each item is selected with care, meant to please Hecatl in his many moods. He lays them gently at the base of the temple wall, whispers something too soft to hear, and steps back. This is the Pashteka way. You might assume they were just traders. But in the Aztec world, the Pashteka were more than that. They were diplomats, couriers, even spies. They carried the wealth of the empire across thousands of miles, through mountain passes, jungles, enemy territories, and brought back, not just goods, but knowledge. They knew which neighboring rulers were uneasy, where famine might strike, where alliances were forming like distant storms. Information, like wind, travels fastest when it's invisible. And so did they. Their journeys were often solitary, sometimes secret, and always sacred. To walk the paths they did was to follow an echo of the gods. Icatl, as the bringer of movement, was the patron of their path. And just like the wind, they never stayed in one place too long. Historians still argue whether the Pashteka functioned more as merchants or as a proto-intelligence network. The answer, of course, is both. The Aztecs didn't draw lines between economics and theology, or between trade and statecraft. Every gesture was layered, every journey part of a spiritual map, as well as a political one. And the rituals of trade, far from mundane. They were laced with myth, meaning, and more than a little superstition. Take, for example, the practice of whispering to the wind before a journey. It wasn't just prayer. It was an act of diplomacy. You didn't just ask for protection, you asked for permission. Before the Pashteka left the city, they often fasted, purified themselves, and performed offerings not just to Hecatl, but to the four cardinal winds, each with their own temperament, their own domain. The north wind, Mictlantecuhtli, was cold and associated with death. The west, Cihuatecuhtli, was linked to ancestral spirits. The south, Huantlampatekuhtli, brought warmth and seasonal change. And the east, well, that was Ukatl's favorite direction, the source of morning, beginnings and breath. They would blow softly into the air, 3 times, no words, just breath, just intention, because in this world, a breath isn't just air, it's. You follow the merchants now, trailing behind, as they step onto a narrow path of stone that leads out of the city. The wind picks up again, threading through the tall grass, carrying the scent of water and spice. Their sandals barely make a sound, but the occasional clink of shell ornaments reminds you they're real, earthly, mortal. A small boy runs up from a house beside the road, offering the lead merchant a cup of something steaming. It smells like a toli corn, gruel with just a hint of chili. The merchant smiles, accepts it, and with a quiet nod, tips the drink to the wind before taking a sip. Even refreshments come with ritual. And then at the edge of the causeway, one of them reaches into a pouch tied at his waist. You feel the shift before you see the object. A small, skull-shaped whistle made of clay. Its features are stylized. Empty eyes, open mouth, sharp teeth curled in a grimace that's not quite human. You can almost feel it watching you. The merchant holds it carefully, like it might bite, if mishandled. He raises it to his lips, but doesn't blow. Not yet. You feel your chest tighten. Because even now, hundreds of years later, even knowing this is history, something in you braces for that sound. That impossible, bone-chilling shriek that doesn't sound like wind or animal or man, but a perfect fusion of all three. The Aztec wind whistle, used in rituals, in warfare, in processions, sometimes to summon, sometimes to scare, sometimes just to signal a change, and always, always, to honor Ixicatl. There are theories that the scream-like design was meant to mimic the cries of the wind god himself, or perhaps of souls being carried by him. There are even modern experiments where people play the whistle into microphones, producing effects so eerie they've been mistaken for horror sound design. But the Aztecs didn't need microphones. They had stone. They had wind. They had faith. The merchant lowers the whistle again. He doesn't play it today. Maybe he doesn't need to. Maybe Ixicatl is already listening. Or maybe the god is standing just behind you, invisible, his feathered cloak brushing past your shoulder. You don't look back. The wind moves on. The path out of Tenochtitlan narrows as the Pochteca continue forward, their silhouettes shrinking against the morning mist. You stay with them, invisible, but tethered, like a stray breeze caught in their wake. Each step farther from the city takes you closer to the edge of their world, where the order of stone temples and market rituals gives way to unknown valleys, stranger gods, and whispers carried on the wind. But before they disappear, one more ritual must be done. They stop at a humble stone altar on the side of the trade route, more moss than monument. It isn't grand, but it's old, older than most of the merchants walking past it. A bundle of offerings already lies at its base, dried beans, cracked cocoa shells, feathers that have lost their gloss. You wouldn't think wind could see these things, but the Aztecs believed Ixicatl noticed everything, especially if it fluttered. One merchant pulls out a gourd filled with water, tips it, and lets the liquid spill, not on the ground, but onto a fan of palm leaves arranged in the shape of a spiral. The water trickles gently, tracing the curve like a tiny stream trying to follow a path designed by something ancient. And then comes the sneeze. You're not making that up. One of the lesser-known rituals of these merchant paths involved a blessing accompanied by a sneeze. Not every time, of course, but it was said that if you sneezed just as you made your offering, it meant Ixicatl was especially close. that he'd breathe through you. Historians still argue whether this sneeze superstition was Aztec in origin or borrowed from earlier cultures like the Toltecs, who also revered wind deities. Some say it was merely a sign of dust or chilly pollen in the air. Others argue that no one would dare sneeze near an offering unless they felt something powerful moving through them. The merchant sneezes once, politely. Everyone pauses. No one laughs. You wonder if he means to, or if that little gust of air from his lungs was borrowed. The procession resumes. Let's talk a little more about the market back in Tenochtitlan. Because for all their long journeys and sacred rituals, the Pacheca didn't exist just for show. They were the lifeblood of commerce. And commerce, like the wind, connects everything. They didn't just trade cocoa and obsidian. They were also responsible for things like feathers, precious, brilliantly colored feathers, from birds that don't live anywhere near the Valley of Mexico. Think scarlet, macaws, quetzals, and hummingbirds with iridescent plumage. These feathers were like currency, but also like words woven into clothing, banners, even scrolls that told stories without a single written symbol. And they traded ideas, architecture, spices, musical instruments, pottery techniques, even gods. The Aztec Empire, after all, was hungry, not just for conquest, but for beauty, for knowledge, for wind-swept rumors that might become prophecies or warnings. And that's why trade wasn't just economic. It was spiritual. The flow of goods mirrored the flow of breath, of Ahikatal's winds. Every item traded was a little story riding the breeze from one land to another. You pause to admire a pack carried by one of the Pacheca. It's not large, but it's intricate, woven from maguey fiber, dyed deep red, adorned with tiny turquoise beads. Inside, who knows? Maybe it's nothing more than dried mushrooms and salt, or maybe it's an artifact destined for a noble's private collection, or an emperor's altar. One merchant, the youngest, hums a low melody. It's not a song, exactly, more of a tone. You recognize it as a merchant's travel tune, meant to keep rhythm and ward off loneliness. The wind picks it up and carries it forward. You swear the breeze begins to echo the tune back, gently warping the notes like a flute with no player. They don't stop to acknowledge it. They never do. Instead, they approach the next part of the road, a narrow stretch bordered by towering reeds, swaying back and forth in time with the rhythm of the tune. The air thickens. The wind slows. It's as if Ikatal himself has crouched down to watch them pass. And still no one whistles. You're beginning to understand why. Not just because of superstition, but because wind is sacred here. You don't mock it. You don't impersonate it. You listen to it. If it whistles, you pay attention. If it howls, you stay inside. And if it stills, you hold your breath and wait. Whistles, those eerie clay skulls we're inching toward, are reserved, used only for ceremony, war, or calling the wind god in moments of desperate need. The Pacheca pass through the reeds without incident. But as you follow behind, a gust kicks up, twisting through the tall green blades. For just a second, the stalks bend all in one direction, not toward the wind, but away from it, like they're bowing, maybe to you, more likely to someone else walking quietly beside you. Unseen, you walk on, heart steady, breath even, and the sound of the merchant's footfalls fades into the hush of leaves. The reeds thin out, and the Pacheca emerge onto a raised stone path, bordered by low brush and wind-stunted trees. You follow, your steps softer now, your breath more attuned to the rhythm of this world. This world where even the air has meaning, where every gust is a sentence in a language most have forgotten how to read. Then, finally, it happens. The lead merchant pauses, places his pack gently on the ground, and signals to the others. No words, just a hand gesture, smooth and practiced. They stop, form a quiet circle. One of them kneels and unties a cloth bundle. Inside lies a row of objects, each wrapped in cotton and bound with thin reed string. With care he unwraps one. It's a whistle. Not just any whistle. The whistle. Small, pale and shaped like a skull. It stares up at you with hollow eyes. Its surface is etched with faint spirals, representing breath, wind, movement. The mouth is open, as if screaming. You imagine Ecatol's breath moving through it, like wind through a canyon. Harsh, beautiful, and a little unsettling. The merchant lifts it, cradles it in both hands, and brings it to his lips. But still, no sound. Because these whistles aren't for fun. They're tools of ritual. They're also warnings. The Pochteca used them not only in ceremonies, but as signals in times of danger. Especially at night, when a scream across the jungle might mean bandits nearby. Or worse, modern archaeologists didn't even know what these whistles were for years. Many found them in graves, assuming they were toys or decorative. It wasn't until one bold researcher actually blew into one that they discovered its true purpose: to unleash a noise so jarring, so disturbingly human, that it chills the spine. It doesn't sound like music. It sounds like a soul being pulled through the wind. Historians still argue whether these whistles were more ceremonial than practical. Some claim they were played en masse before battle, to terrify enemies. Others believe they were used in death rituals, to guide souls through the air toward the afterlife. And some, especially local oral histories, say they were direct instruments of Ecatol himself. Blowing one was like dialing his number. Today the whistle remains silent. The merchant just holds it, feeling the weight, maybe remembering a time when it was used, maybe hoping it won't be needed again. The wind seems to notice. It pauses, just for a moment, like a breath held in anticipation, and then a whisper, not from the whistle, from the trees. You turn your head, expecting to see someone or something, but there's only air, moving, watching, passing. The Pochteca move on. They don't speak of the whistle, they just rewrap it, return it to its bundle and continue forward. Whatever reason they had for bringing it out has passed. Still, it lingers in your mind. That sharp skull face, that imagined sound, that unplayed warning. You imagine a different night. Long ago, a Pochteca camped in the jungle, their goods hidden beneath woven mats, their fire small, and then a rustle, a figure in the dark, a shadow that shouldn't be there. The whistle rises. A blast cuts through the night like a scream wrenched from another world. The shadow flees, or doesn't, and the wind keeps moving. Whistles weren't the only things Ecatol was said to speak through. Sometimes he sent signs, dropped leaves in spirals, made smoke bend in unnatural ways, or caused birds to scatter without reason. In those moments the Pochteca listened. They didn't argue, they adjusted. If the wind said turn back, they turned back. That's part of why they were so trusted in the empire. Not just because of their wealth or bravery, but because of their discipline. They followed signs. They respected the forces bigger than themselves. And they came back with knowledge most people never touched. You keep walking now, your footsteps matching the uneven rhythm of the merchant caravan. The wind rises and falls like a sleeping breath, soft, steady, with an occasional snore of dust. In the distance you hear the faint trickle of a stream, birds chirping without urgency, and somewhere far off, the low thrum of another whistle. This one so distant it might not even be real, but you hear it. The merchants do not flinch. They've heard worse. You reach a hilltop, and below stretches a vast plain, golden in the morning sun, dotted with patches of forest, small villages, and winding trails. Somewhere down there is the next market, the next sacred stop, the next offering, but not yet. For now the Pochteca sit, unwrap a meal, dried maize cakes, bits of fruit, a roasted cheel still clinging to its stem. One merchant pours water into a ceramic cup, and before drinking tips a few drops onto the ground. Not for himself, for Hikatal. You do the same. If only in your mind. The wind catches the scent of the meal, swirls it around you, and then moves on. It always does. You stay on the hilltop a little longer, letting the warmth of the rising sun soak into your skin. The breeze brushes past you like a curious pet, never quite still, never fully gone. Below, the Pashteka finish their simple meal, rewrap their bundles, and prepare to descend into the valley. But before they do, the youngest among them stands and looks to the east. His gaze fixes on a stretch of land where the wind moves just slightly differently, more forcefully, tugging the grasses at sharp angles, turning leaves so their silver undersides glint like fish scales in the sun. The others notice it too. No one speaks, but you see it in their faces. Recognition, not of a danger necessarily, but of a sign. Ikatal, perhaps, offering advice, or mischief. The wind doesn't always guide with clarity. Still, the Pashteka adjust their route, turning slightly northward along a smaller, less traveled trail. It's longer, rockier, but if the wind leans that way, they follow. You descend with them, the hill giving way to dry scrubland dotted with agave and low cacti. The sun climbs, and with it the wind softens, becomes more playful. It tugs at your sleeves, your hair. At one point, it swirls a small dust spiral ahead of the merchants, then vanishes just as quickly. A warning, a joke, or just movement? Because that's what Ihikatl is all about. Motion. He is the starter of all things, the opener of paths, the breath before speech, the breeze before the storm, the tickle in the air just before something changes. Historians still argue whether Ihikatl was considered a creator god in the same way as Ometeotl or Quetzalcoatl. Some sources suggest that Ihikatl merely assisted the gods of creation, nudging the sky into place, coaxing the sun to rise. Others claim he was more powerful than he let on, a god who preferred to act quietly, who never raised his voice, but still shaped the course of worlds with a whisper. And here, walking among dry leaves and brittle grass, you begin to understand. It's not always about thunder or fire. Sometimes it's about suggestion. A breeze on your neck when no one's behind you. A change in trail, because the air smells different. A whistle that never sounds, but still silences a room. Up ahead, the trail tightens, winding between two jagged rock formations. The stone on either side has been etched with faint markings, curved spirals, bird wings and lines like flowing air. This is a wind pass, an ancient one, carved out not just by time, but by belief. It's said that Ihikatl liked to linger in places like this. Tight corridors, where the wind funneled, where voices echoed and decisions wobbled. You feel it now. The change. Your breath shortens. Your thoughts thin out. The Pashteka slow their steps. They reach into their packs, not for weapons, but for incense. Copal, crushed into cakes. One merchant sets 3 small lumps on a flat stone, lights them, and lets the thick, sweet smoke drift upward. The wind grabs it greedily, pulling it into the pass, scattering it in fingers of fog. And there, as if on cue, the whistle returns. Not blown by anyone here, but unmistakable. It starts low, a wheeze, a dry sob, then higher, twisting into that strange harmony between scream and sigh, like a ghost learning how to breathe. You freeze. The merchants do not. They've heard it before. They continue through the pass, heads low, shoulders steady. The wind increases, funneling through the rock like water down a narrow pipe. You feel your cloak snap against your legs. A few loose stones skitter from above, but no one turns back. Because if Ihikatl is present, the only thing to do is to keep moving. There are stories, some whispered, some scratched onto pottery, of Pashteka disappearing in wind passes. Not from attack, not from hunger, just gone, taken by the breeze, brought to some other realm, perhaps to serve Ihakatl in his palace of moving air, where rooms float on clouds, and messages are carried by the flap of a hummingbird's wing. But you're not taken. You pass through. The wind settles. The Pakteka emerge into a new clearing, where tall grasses sway like an audience rising in slow applause. One of them glances over his shoulder, not at you, but at the pass itself, just to make sure it's still there. Then they smile. You've passed the test. The trail continues, and with it, the stories carried on air. There's something peaceful in this now, knowing that the path is shaped not just by your feet, but by a God who moves unseen. You begin to notice smaller details, how the birds quiet just before a gust, how the grass flattens in waves, like invisible hands pressing it down, how every sound seems either softened or sharpened by the breeze, as if Ihakatl were fine-tuning the world. You exhale. The wind catches it and keeps it. The trail broadens into a dusty plateau. From here the world looks stretched and quiet, like someone pressed pause on the landscape. The Pakteka walk, without urgency, as if they know time belongs to the wind here, not the sun. You move with them, but your attention drifts, because nestled in a woven basket on one merchant's back is something dazzling. When the wind shifts the cloth just slightly, it reveals a glimpse of green and blue, so vivid it almost hums. Feathers. Not just any feathers. Quetzal feathers, long, iridescent, impossibly fine. Each one as rare as a gold coin and far more valued. These were once reserved only for nobility, warriors of the highest rank, or priests at the heart of Ihakatl's ceremonies. To possess even one was a mark of status. To carry a bundle meant you were either very important or very trusted. And here's the twist. These feathers didn't come from anywhere near here. They traveled from deep in the jungles of what's now Guatemala or southern Mexico, carried by other Pakteka, traded along winding paths and across rivers, kept safe through storms and theft and superstition. Some feathers never made it. Others ended up in the capes of emperors. This is the Pakteka's greatest strength. Not just that they trade, but what they trade. Historians still puzzle over the logistics. How did the Aztecs create a system of long-distance trade, so efficient, so vast, without wheels or beasts of burden? The answer lies in the sheer discipline of the merchants, and in the belief that their journey was sacred. They didn't just carry goods, they carried breath, movement, Ihakatl's will disguised as obsidian and cocoa, and nothing was more valuable to them than cacao beans. That's right, the base currency of the empire wasn't silver or gold, but chocolate. Well, the raw form anyway. Cacao beans were so essential that there were rules about how they could be carried, how they were stored, and how they were taxed. Merchants often traveled with thousands, neatly bundled and double-wrapped to prevent the scent from attracting animals or gods. You pass a village now. It's quiet, built low to the ground with roofs of palm and earth. Children run alongside the path, barefoot, waving at the traveler. Their laughter rings out, caught and stretched by the wind. A woman sells tamales under a small canopy. The Pakteka stop briefly, exchange a few cacao beans for food, and without being asked, leave a single feather tied to a stalk of maize growing near the hut. A thank you maybe, or protection. You're learning now. Nothing these merchants do is random. Every gesture is part of something larger, a thread in a tapestry so vast it would take lifetimes to unroll. As they rest in the shade, the youngest merchant pulls out a scroll, codex style, made of amatal paper. It's covered in pictographs, jaguar heads, swirling winds, black footprints, birds. It's not a map exactly. It's a memory, a guide built not on roads but on patterns. Wind shifts, cloud shapes, the songs of birds in certain valleys. One symbol repeats a curved spiral next to a reed. Ihakatl, the wind, a signal to be cautious or to proceed. You look around. The wind is calm here, not absent, never absent, but softer, like a breath taken through the nose instead of the mouth, restful. One merchant lies back against a stone, removes a pendant from under his tunic. It's shaped like a duck. Ihakatal in some stories wore a duck-billed mask, a reminder that movement exists, even in still water, that gliding is a kind of motion too. Another merchant sharpens a blade, not for combat, but for ceremony. Knives made from obsidian, sharper than steel, used in rituals tied to commerce. When a big trade was completed, it wasn't just a handshake and a receipt. It was often a blessing, a bloodletting, and sometimes even a story told through wind instruments. Yes, the whistles again. But more than just the skull-shaped screamers. There were flutes too, reed pipes that mimicked the breeze through trees, the cry of distant birds, the hush before rainfall. Played together, these instruments didn't just entertain. They invited Ihakatal to listen, to watch, to guide the next journey. You think back to the night before, when that whistle howled in the wind pass. You wonder if it was real, or maybe just a memory replayed by the wind, because that's what Ihakatal does. He replays, he carries echoes, not just of sound but of movement, of time, of intention. The Poktika rise again, the sun dips slightly, shadows stretch across the path, like sleepy hands, and you follow once more toward the next trade post, the next offering, the next gust of meaning. Before they go, one merchant stops, kneels and whispers something into his hand, then opens his palm to the breeze, and the wind takes it. Whatever it was, the road begins to slope downward, and the terrain changes yet again. Trees grow taller, vines stretch lazily across low branches, and the air feels thicker, wetter. You've entered a different climate zone now, one where the wind does less shouting and more murmuring. But Ihakatal is still here. You feel it in the way the leaves sway just slightly ahead of your steps, as if moved by something scouting ahead. In the Aztec world, that sensation wasn't just poetic, it was believed. Wind could scout, wind could lead. The Poktika follow this humid path, with the same reverence they gave the drier plateau. They shift their bundles, adjust their sandals, and pause now and then, not to rest but to listen, not for wild animals, not for other travelers, but for the breath of Ihakatal. You begin to notice that these merchants don't just fear the wind god. They respect him like a guest, who might show up at any time, uninvited. Yes, but still welcome, still divine. There's a moment where one of the older merchants stops completely. He's staring at a tree, not just any tree, a sacred ceiba, tall and still as a temple pillar, with roots that look like petrified snakes, and branches high enough to snag the clouds. Without a word, he removes his sandals, and walks barefoot up to its base. He reaches out and touches the bark gently, then presses his forehead against the trunk. His lips move silently. You don't hear a word, but the wind does. Ceiba trees were considered sacred across Mesoamerican cultures. They were said to connect the underworld, the earth and the heavens, a kind of spiritual antenna. And Ihakatal, he could use them like doorways, or megaphones. Historians still debate how widely these wind rituals were practiced across regions. Some say they were specific to certain merchant classes. Others believe the traditions were borrowed from neighboring cultures, like the Mixtec and the Totonac, who also had deep wind lore. Like everything in Aztec religion, it's hard to draw clear lines. The spiritual landscape was as intertwined as the jungle vines now twisting above you. After the Ceiba offering, the air shifts. A wind, not strong but focused, moves through the trees with purpose. It doesn't swirl, it cuts, straight through the underbrush, between trunks, parting low grasses like an unseen procession. You feel it skim the side of your face, and then it stops. The Poktika look at each other. One of them nods. They continue. You're beginning to understand Ihakatal doesn't just blow, he directs, like a hand on your back steering you through a crowded street, like a thought you didn't mean to think. But suddenly, movement in his world is always sacred, even if you don't know where it's taking you. Eventually the jungle opens into a clearing. At its center stands a structure, not a village, not a temple, something in between, a kamakuk, a kind of rest station. But not just for the body. This one is round, wind-friendly. You smile, Inside, the walls are lined with reeds and feathers, bundles of dried herbs, small effigies of Ehakatal, with their duck-billed masks, and outstretched arms. There's no priest here, no chanting, just silence and air. The merchants enter, one at a time, each bowing slightly at the door. No one speaks, no one breaks the ritual. They sit, you sit, and the wind joins. It flows through the reed walls with such gentleness that the feathers on the far wall tremble but never fall. It passes over the herbs and carries their scent toward you. Copal, chili, and something sweet, like dried agave. The scent curls in your nose, then leaves. A small fire is lit, not for cooking, for off. The Poktika produce tokens from their satchels, river stones, bits of polished shell, carved pieces of jade, with tiny spirals etched into them. One by one they place them into a shallow bowl at the center of the room. The fire crackles. No one flinches. Then, without any cue you can see, they begin to hum. It starts low, a single note, then joins with a second, a third. Not a song, just tone, vibration. It resonates in your bones, in the reed walls, in the fire itself. And the wind answers. It moves once more through the Kamakak, stronger now, lifting bits of ash from the fire, tugging at cloaks and hair, and just for a moment playing every reed wall like a flute. The entire building sings. This is not a storm, this is not a warning, this is a visit. Ehakatal has arrived, and he is pleased. You sit still, afraid to move, not because of fear but awe. The merchants continue humming, and the fire continues burning, and the god of wind continues to flow around and through you like you've become hollow, like your ribs are just another reed pipe in his orchestra. Then, as quickly as it began, the wind slows, settles, stops. The Poktika open their eyes. One of them smiles. You leave the Kamakak quietly, your footsteps lighter than before. The wind doesn't push you anymore. It walks beside you. You step back into the jungle air, and for a moment it feels almost too still, like the calm after a deep breath. The path ahead shimmers with heat, and birds flit from branch to branch in wary silence. The Poktika tighten their satchels and move forward, but the pace is slower now, not from exhaustion, but from reverence. Something happened back there in that round reed-walled rest stop, something they won't speak of, but they all felt it. You did too. You walk a little lighter now, like the wind rearranged the weight of your body. Around you, the landscape begins to change again. Less humid now, drier, rockier. You're entering the beginning of a different region, one where the wind moves less playfully, and more directly. It has places to go. The Poktika take notice. You see it in the way they glance up at the trees more often, in how they recheck their path against the patterns of cloud and branch, because this part of the journey is trickier, not because of terrain, but because of omens. And in Aztec culture, wind omens were serious business. Merchants paid close attention to shifts in the wind. A sudden gust from the west, pause and wait. A spiraling dust devil in the road, turn around. A tree branch blown across your path, even something as simple as a dry leaf blowing counterclockwise, could stop an entire expedition in its tracks. Historians still debate whether these signs were codified in merchant training, or simply passed down orally. Some suggest the Poktika had their own wind calendars, similar to the tonal Pohuali, an Aztec sacred calendar, made up of 260 days each governed by a deity or force. Others believe they simply trusted instinct, honed over hundreds of journeys and thousands of footsteps. But one thing is certain, wind was not ignored. Not ever. You pass a crossroads, literally, two paths split, one slightly narrower than the other. The merchants pause, a gust kicks up, brief, from the north. They wait, it dies, and then another gust, from the east, stronger. Without a word they choose the eastern path. No questions, no discussion, just faith, and a little fear. You start to feel it too, that subtle dread that accompanies the unexplained, like when the air changes just before a storm, or when the trees stop rustling all at once. It's not dangerous exactly, but it means something, and when things carry meaning, people listen. It's in this landscape, these crumbling highlands with their jagged silhouettes and skeletal trees, that the fear of Ehakatal's wrath grows stronger. Because while the wind god is mostly gentle,
He is also change, and change is not always soft. You hear stories along the path spoken quietly, almost reluctantly. One merchant recounts how, on a past journey, they found another group of travelers frozen with fear on the trail, not from bandits, not from beasts, but from a wind that blew in sharp bursts, always behind them, never ahead, a wind that seemed to follow, that never touched their faces, only their backs. No one was harmed, but no one spoke for days. Another tells of a whistle found in the jungle, half buried. No one had brought it, no one had lost it, and yet there it lay, pristine, bone white and perfectly shaped like a screaming skull. They left it. The next day the wind blew in circles for hours, trapping smoke in the camp, entangling their path until they turned back. You glance around now, a little more carefully. The wind has picked up again, and it's blowing from behind. The merchants feel it too. They stop, adjust their packs, not to rest, but to place small offerings at the edge of the trail. Bits of maize, shards of shell, even a strand of hair. These are not gifts, they are apologies. A Hakatal, for all his airy silence, has rules. You don't mock the wind, you don't ignore it, and you never assume it isn't listening. The group presses on, but with more caution now. They speak less, and they never, ever whistle. Because in these regions, a whistle could be mistaken. It could sound too much like a summoning, and a Hakatal doesn't take well to being summoned on accident. You walk with them, every step wrapped in wind, every breath watched by a force you can't see but feel in your bone. The path tightens once more, then opens suddenly into a broad basin. Here the wind changes again. It becomes playful, almost musical. It stirs the grass in ripples, rustles the reeds in gentle rhythms, and turns the hanging seed pods of the trees into soft rattles. The tension eases. The Pokteka begin to hum again, low, wordless, steady. And just like that, a Hakatal forgives. You exhale. So does the land.
The basin feels like a bowl of calm after the tight, watchful trails. The Poshtaka let their shoulders fall a little. They speak again, not loudly, not carelessly, but in the easy cadence of people who know the worst of the journey may be behind them. The wind here is different. It doesn't test, it dances. And yet, even in peace, there's memory. This is where they camp tonight. No fires yet, no meals unpacked. First they'll make camp, as they've always done, and as they will teach others to do, should they ever bring apprentices on this path. Each merchant has a role. One clears stones. Another sets a perimeter with crushed chile and ash to ward off spirits and snakes. A third starts arranging sleeping mats in a circle, not for warmth, but for visibility. Even here in the calm, they stay vigilant. Then someone unpacks a whistle. But not that whistle. This one is long and slender, carved from reed, painted in spirals. It doesn't scream, it sings. A ceremonial aerophone, used for evening rituals and gentle summoning, not of gods but of stories. The Poshtaka didn't just trade goods, they traded tales. And as the wind slips softly through the reeds that ring the clearing, one merchant begins to play. It's a slow, low song. You almost don't hear it at first, just a faint melodic hum. Then another merchant joins in, using a bone flute, its tone higher, sharper, like a bird calling from a far-off branch. A rhythm begins. Simple, sleepy, layered. It's not music for dancing, it's music for remembering. You sit close to the fire as it's kindled with care. Dry twigs arranged in a spiral as is tradition. The flame flutters, then steadies. The smoke rises, and is caught by a breeze that seems to know exactly where to go. Now comes the story. The eldest merchant speaks, not loudly, but with a voice worn smooth by years of repetition. He tells of a night not unlike this one, when the wind blew too suddenly from all directions. The Poshtaka were camped in a field like this, he says, but when they awoke their mats had been turned, not scattered, not stolen, just rotated, each one 90 degrees. They asked no questions, they left offerings, and the wind let them go. Historians still argue whether such tales are exaggerations, oral metaphors, or coded instruction. But in the soft firelight, under stars half hidden by wind-pulled clouds, it doesn't matter.
The story feels true. It hums with the same rhythm as the flutes. It blends with the wind, becomes part of the wind. Another story follows, this one whispered by a younger merchant, about a market in the jungle that appears only on windless nights. You find it by standing still, he says, and listening for nothing. If you hear no wind, you walk 5 steps backward, then wait. The wind will return, and when it does, it brings the sound of drums, of feathers brushing against stalls, of cocoa being poured. But when you reach the place, there's nothing, just crushed maize, and a single still feather. No one's ever found it twice. They call it the market of the dead. You'd expect laughter, maybe a chuckle at such a ghost tale, but the merchants don't laugh. They simply nod, because in their world, such things are not ridiculous. They are reminders. Hikatal is not bound to roads or reason. He might sweep away your debt, or your direction. The fire dies lower, the flutes fade, the stars emerge one by one, and the wind moves only in pulses now, like a sleeping animal sighing in its nest. You lie back, the grass cool beneath you, the sky impossibly wide, and then it happens again. A sound, not music, not story, a whistle, not blown, not nearby, but there. It slips through the reeds like a warning you already heard yesterday. Not loud, not angry, just a presence, a memory re-whistled by the earth. No one sits up, no one reacts. They simply stay still, and the sound fades. In the morning, they will leave a few cocoa beans near the base of a tree, and move on. But tonight, they sleep beside the wind. You do too. The fire has gone cold, its coals barely warm, and a single spiral of smoke rises, as if Ikatal himself exhaled it. In his sleep, you sit up slowly. The others are already moving, silent, purposeful. No one speaks first thing in the morning, not out of grogginess, but the first words of the day belong to the wind. You wait for it to speak, and it does. A breeze, light and dry, rustles the tall grasses behind the camp. It carries with it the scent of baked earth and warm leaves. That's enough. The journey resumes. They walk in single file now, the same rhythm, the same soft footfalls. Their shadows stretch ahead of them in the golden morning light, long and peaceful. You follow, watching how they glance at the horizon, noting clouds, leaf movement, the patterns of birds. Then one of the merchants does something curious. He lifts a small pouch, shakes it once, and opens it to the wind. Out float dozens of flower petals, dried marigold, bright bougainvillea, crushed hibiscus. They dance in the air, scattering like colored embers. No one reaches for them. They were never meant to be kept, just released, like prayers with wings. It's a ritual offering known among the Pakshtaka as El Uelo Colado, the silent flight. A message carried to Ikatal without word. Historians are unsure how long this ritual existed, whether it predates the Aztecs, or emerged during trade expansions. Either way, it's lovely, and just a little bit spooky, watching those petals disappear into the sky like they've been expected elsewhere. They continue walking. Today the Pakshtaka pass through a stretch of land known for its winds, strong, clean and directional. This is important, because the empire depended on wind not just spiritually, but practically. You're about to learn about the post road. Yes, the Aztecs had couriers painani, young runners trained to relay messages across vast distances. These runners used the same roads as the Pakshtaka, often stopping at the same rest stations, and the wind played a role here too. If Ikatal was blowing against you, a message might be delayed. If he blew behind, it was a blessing. Some say runners wore feathers at their ankles, not just for decoration or status, but to sense wind shifts on the move. A clever trick. The Pakshtaka used similar methods, often tying tassels to their packs, watching their movement like nature's compass. And yet, not all wind was welcomed. There's a belief, quietly held, that Ikatal sometimes speaks through wind, not as a voice, but as memory. He might replay a sound, a word, a laugh, from long ago. If a merchant heard a loved one's voice in the wind, they'd stop and leave something behind. A thread from a tunic, a drop of water, even a story spoken into the air. The god had borrowed something of theirs, and you do not take back what a god borrowed. You begin to understand that Ikatal is not just revered, he is negotiated with, traded with, appeased, and that brings you to wind taxes. Yes, actual tribute to the god of wind. In several regions under Aztec control, villages were expected to offer regular tribute specifically in honor of Ikatal. These included incense, birds, particularly those known for flight, maize, and carved figurine. One record even describes a ceremonial kite, crafted from bark and reeds, flown once, then burned, the ashes scattered to release the offering to the sky. These wind taxes weren't just for show. They reinforced the idea that Ikatal had a say in everything, from whether your crops grew, to whether your merchant caravan made it home with all limbs intact. Today, the Pakštaka Pass, one such village. It's small, nestled into the base of a ridge, its homes low and rounded to resist the gusts that howl through in spring. A boy runs out with a basket of chili, his hair blowing sideways. One of the merchants exchanges it for a few cacao beans, and as always leaves behind a tuft of white down, a feather offering. Simple but potent. This is how balance is kept. Goods for goods, breath for breath, wind for wind. The journey continues, and the terrain grows flatter, dustier. The horizon stretches wide, open like a scroll waiting for ink, and there, just at the edge, you see it. A figure, alone, still. It's not a threat, it's a statue. The travelers approach slowly, reverently. It's Ikat, or rather a stone likeness of him. Round body, stylized duckbill mask, arms outstretched, as if to part the sky itself. Around the statue lie hundreds of small offerings, feathers, shells, whistles, bones carved into spirals. One merchant kneels. He places a folded piece of amatlal paper at the statue's feet. You can't see what's written on it, but you guess. It's not a letter. It's a memory, or a request, or maybe just a thank you. Then they walk on, and Ikatal watches them go, unmoving, but never absent. You keep walking too. With the wind, always with the wind. The path stretches on beneath a milky sky. The sun is hidden now, softened by thin clouds that drift lazily, casting a pale light over the land. The wind has mellowed to a constant hush, no longer full of omens or tricks, just a steady reminder of movement, of presence. You trail behind the Pakštaka. As they approach a low rock, at its crest sits a curious formation, 3 standing stones arranged in a triangle, their surfaces smooth from years of weathering. Around them the grass is short, pressed by constant breeze. The merchants approach with measured steps. This is not just a landmark. This is a listening place. The Pakštaka believe Ikatal pauses here, not to speak, but to listen. Travelers often stop to whisper confessions, recite short prayers, or share fragments of story. One merchant kneels and speaks barely above breath, while another scatters ground chili in a loose spiral around one of the stones. Not for spice, for scent. Ikatal doesn't need ears to hear. He listens through motion, scent, vibration. No one ever lingers too long, and today is no exception. They continue down the slope, back onto flatter land. The Pakštaka may carry goods, but they also carry information, gossip, rumors, alliances forming in distant valleys. When they pass through cities or village markets, they trade in words as much as in obsidian or feather. And where there are whispers, the wind is always close by. It's said Ikatal knows more than any other god, not because he spies but because he drifts. He floats into council meetings, marriage arguments, priestly rituals unnoticed, but absorbing. The god of wind is also the god of secrets, and so the Pakštaka treat information like incense, meant to be offered with respect. Tonight, the caravan reaches another temporary camp, this time by a riverside, where tall reeds bend sideways in a single synchronized bow. No talking near the river. That's the rule. Ikatal lives in the reeds, they say, and he remembers what you say in his presence. One merchant, younger and bold, begins to whistle absent-mindedly as he works. A sharp look from the elder silences him. He nods in apology, drops a cacao bean into the river. It's enough, for now. There's a saying among the Pakhtaka. Don't carry the wind in your mouth. It means don't repeat what Ikatal tells you. Don't spread words the wind didn't ask you to share. There's power in silence, especially in a culture where sound, breath, and speech are sacred. This idea extends to another custom, the wind pouch. Each Pakhtaka carries a small cloth pouch, tied with twine. It contains no food, no tools, just personal tokens. A bird bone, a piece of shell, a bit of hair, a knotted string. Some say these are used to trap wind, memories, or messages sent by Ikatal on the road. At night, the merchants might open the pouch and whisper into it. In the morning, they tie it shut again, not to hold the words in, but to protect others from hearing what wasn't meant for them. Historians still argue whether these wind pouches were literal or symbolic, but surviving ones have been found. Simple, personal, well-worn. Some even have faint inscriptions that read like private poems. Tonight, beside the fire, one merchant unties his. He doesn't say a word, just opens it briefly to the air, then closes it again. The wind picks up slightly, just for a moment. You begin to understand that the Pakhtaka aren't just walking, they're listening every step of the way, watching how smoke bends, how birds fly, how leaves scatter. You remember a detail someone mentioned days ago, how the merchants sometimes sleep in a spiral, feet inward, heads outward, like petals around a center. You thought it was for defense. Now you wonder if it's to mimic a wind pattern, to invite Ikatal into their dream. As the river burbles and the reeds lean in the dark, one merchant pulls out his whistle. Not the scream one, not the song one, a different kind. It's shaped like a frog, with holes on its back. When blown, it produces a wet, throaty bloop, like bubbles rising in a spring. He blows it once, softly, then tucks it away. Why? Because Ikatal isn't only the wind of the high mountains, he's also the breath that stirs puddles, that sends ripples across ponds, that carries voices across canyons. Each sound has a place. Each whistle has a purpose. The others not. No story tonight, just sleep. Because tomorrow they enter sacred ground, a place where the wind doesn't just blow, it's...
Morning comes with a hush more profound than silence. Even the birds keep their song short. The river has gone still. No ripples, no movement, just a flat mirror stretching behind the Pakhtaka as they rise, roll their mats, and prepare for the next leg of the journey. Today they walk toward a place where no one dares whistle, not even by mistake. As the caravan moves forward, the trees thin and the path turns to volcanic rock, dark and cracked like old bread crust. The land rises slightly, forming uneven ridges. You can feel it now, a shift in the air. It's not colder, not stronger, but it's intentional. The wind here feels like it's watching you. The Pakhtaka approach a wide, flat space where grass refuses to grow. In its center, a circle of stones, each carved with spiral symbols, arranged with such precision that even now, centuries later, they feel freshly placed. This is one of the old spots. They call it El Respiro Olvidado, the forgotten breath. No buildings, no altars, just space, wind, and memory. This is where the stories say Ikatal once stood in full form, visible to mortals. A duck-billed mask, feathered cloak, spiraled chest, and feet that didn't touch the ground. According to legend, he spoke only one word, and the wind carried that word across the empire, but no one could agree on what it was. Some say it was a blessing. Some say it was a warning. Others say it was simply his name, echoing back into himself. No matter what it was, no one ever tried to repeat it, because to repeat a god's breath is to summon him. And that brings us to why merchants like these Pakhtaka never whistle. Whistling was considered more than rude. It was a violation. A person who whistled after dark risked confusing Ihikatal, or worse, mimicking him. That's dangerous. You don't impersonate a god whose domain is invisible, everywhere, and a little moody. One story told in the southern valleys describes a boy who whistled in a cave during a storm. The cave collapsed not immediately, but weeks later, the elders said Ihikatal was thinking about it. Just thinking. Another tale speaks of a woman who sang a note too close to a whistle while grinding maize, and the wind blew all her tortillas into the fire. A mild punishment, but a message nonetheless. Historians have documented this phenomenon across Mesoamerica, taboos around nighttime whistling. Even today, in rural villages throughout Mexico and Central America, locals still warn children never to whistle after dark. Not because of Ihikatal by name, but because of something old, something remembered in bone, even when the name is forgotten. Here at the circle of stones, the Pashteka stop. Each one kneels. One of them pulls a whistle from his sash, not a skull-shaped one, not musical, but plain and round, made of clay, unpainted, untuned, just a vessel. He raises it to his lips, then lowers it again. No sound. He places it at the base of a stone, and steps back. This is the non-whistle, an offering of intent not to summon. You feel the logic now. Silence can be louder than sound. In a world where every breath might be divine, restraint is its own kind of worship. Then they stand and walk on, not quickly, not casually. Each step forward is permission requested, then granted, and just when the stones are out of sight, the wind picks up hard and sudden, like an answer finally arriving. It rushes through the brush, tugs at cloaks, swirls your hair round your face. For a moment you're nearly blinded, but it passes, leaves nothing broken, just changed. You wipe your eyes and look ahead. The terrain has softened again, the wind spent for now, the Pashteka are quiet, not from fear, but from respect. You notice something small and easy to miss. The youngest merchant removes a white string from his wrist and lets it float away. It catches the breeze and disappears. A thank you, maybe, or an apology for having almost whistled days ago. Everyone remembers, even the wind. The day stretches long and open now, the land flat and golden. You hear nothing strange, feel no sudden chills. The path is uneventful. Some might call it boring. But in this world, boring is sacred. It means Ihikatal is content. You keep walking. The wind hums softly at your side. By late afternoon, the Pashteka reach the edge of a forest, denser than any they've yet crossed. The canopy here forms a woven ceiling, filtering the sun into long shafts of honeyed light. The air changes again, warmer, but still moving. Always moving. A reminder, you haven't left Ihikatal behind. You never do. They stop before entering. Not out of hesitation, but tradition. One by one, the merchants remove a handful of ground maize from a pouch and scatter it on the path ahead. Some whisper, some close their eyes. The forest accepts the offering with a sigh. You step beneath the branches, the world closes in. Green, gold and damp. Sounds change here. Footsteps soften. Breath feels heavier, but the wind still finds its way, threading through vines and leaves like a ribbon pulled by invisible fingers. Ihikatal is patient. He moves even when no one sees him. And in this forest, there are stories. You've entered the region near Xochimilco, a place known today for its canals and flower boats, but long ago it was a land of markets, spirits and strange wind. The Pashteka pass by what looks like a clearing, overgrown and half forgotten. In its center, a wide sunken square of stone. It doesn't look like much, but this is the market of the dead. You've heard of it before in one of the stories whispered around the fire, and now it's real. Not a ghost market in the sky or under the earth, just a site no longer used by the living, but still visited, still remembered, and sometimes still heard. The Pashtika approach quietly. They don't enter the sunken space. No one does. Instead, they walk the perimeter clockwise, eyes on the ground. One of them leaves a broken pendant at the corner, obsidian cracked through the center. Another tosses in a pinch of salt. No words, because here, sound carries. It said the market of the dead echoes, not what you say, but what you almost say. That Ihikatal listens harder here than anywhere else. He collects half-thoughts, fragments, breathless fears and lost dreams. They say if you linger too long, you'll hear a voice you recognize, your own made, or someone long gone. Historians still argue about the nature of this place. Some believe it was once a real trade hub, abandoned after a sudden fire. Others claim it was always ceremonial, a space for rituals rather than commerce. No records survive that explain its true purpose, which, in a way, feels fitting. Not everything sacred is labeled. The Pashtika don't linger. They finish the circle, then step back into the trees. The breeze picks up and a leaf falls, not from above, but from the side, spiraling in, like a slow-motion dance. It lands at your feet and you hesitate to touch it. Instead, you step over. There's reverence in small avoidance. Deeper in the forest, the path narrows again. The wind thickens, not in speed, but in texture. It carries more than air now. You smell something unfamiliar, floral but bitter, like crushed petals, soaked in smoke. The merchants smell it too. They nod. They know where it's coming from. Up ahead lies the house of the wind carrier. It's not a house, not really, just a cluster of stone columns, barely holding up a roof of woven palm and clay tiles. Beneath it lies a flat stone slab, smooth as water, blackened by years of incense. This is where wind rituals were once held in full ceremony. You've arrived on the day of none. No priest waits here, no dancers, no drums, but the structure remains, and so does the air. It swirls just slightly faster under the roof, tracing lines across the slab like invisible fingers reading old stories. The Pashtika step forward, and one by one, they exhale across the stone, not dramatically, just a breath, one breath each, a gift. Or maybe a reminder, we still move, we still listen, we still carry. This is what Ihikatal values above all, movement, not rush, not storm, motion, a leaf turning, a merchant arriving, a breath offered freely. You take your turn, you lean in, you breathe across the stone, and the wind answers, not with sound, not with chill, but with understanding. It passes over your skin, like warm water, then vanishes. You step back. One merchant places a tiny wind pouch beside the stone, a final offering, before they continue. Then they walk on. The forest begins to thin. The light sharpens. You can see blue sky again between the branches. The market of the dead fades behind you, but the wind carries pieces of it forward, just in case. By late afternoon, the Pashtika reach the edge of the forest and step out into a plain so wide, it feels like the sky has decided to walk beside you. The horizon stretches without obstruction. No hills, no rivers, just open land and open wind. And suddenly, Ihikatal feels bigger. Without trees or stone to shape him, the wind spreads its arms in every direction. It's not fierce, but it's present, fully awake, fully aware. You feel it press against your back, tug at your sleeves, lift your breath before you even mean to speak. The Pashtika don't speak here, not because of rules, but because the wind speaks first. They let it guide. You begin to notice a rhythm, not in your feet, but in the way the wind pulses. A two-beat breath, one long push forward, one brief inhale back. It matches the steps of the caravan, almost like Ihikatal is pacing you. And this is when you understand something deeper. The wind doesn't just move the world, it paces it. It decides the speed of journeys, the timing of words, the arrival of events. In Aztec ritual, Ixicatl was invoked to prepare the way, not just for travelers, but for gods. It was said that when the world needed change, Ixicatl would go ahead of it and blow the doors open. Literally, he was the opener of temples, of seasons, of fate. And here on this wide plain, you feel it. This is the moment when nothing seems to happen, but everything is quietly aligning. The Poshteka don't rush, they don't rest, they just move, gracefully, inevitably, like breath pulled through a reed. Up ahead, you spot a lone tree. Strange, out here, nothing else grows for miles. It's crooked, bent sideways by a lifetime of wind. A single red ribbon flutters from one of its branches, tied by someone long ago. Or maybe not so long, maybe just last week. One merchant walks to it, bows gently, and places a stone at the tree's roots. They don't explain. They never do. But the tree is now. It's called El Árbol te recuerda, the tree that remembers. It doesn't grow leaves anymore, but it always moves, even on windless days. This part of the plain once marked the edge of Aztec territory, a boundary not just of geography, but of diplomacy. And it was Ixicatl who helped shape those borders, not with battles, but with breezes. It's said that emperors would consult wind patterns before approving new alliances. If the wind came from the wrong direction, on the day of negotiation, the meeting was postponed. Some scoff at this now. How could a breeze determine policy? But the Poshteka knew better. They saw the wind not as random, but as responsive. They told stories of villages that prospered only while the wind came regularly from the east, of others cursed by a windless year. Some believed Ixicatl withheld movement as punishment. Others claimed he simply lost interest. To keep his favor, people left gifts in high places, feathers tied to poles, whistles hung in trees, even capes stitched with spirals and left to flap until they fell apart. These weren't just offerings, they were conversations. You wonder now about your own conversations with movement, where you've gone, what you've resisted, what you've let carry you forward. The wind picks up again, playful, then firm, and just like that it shifts. Now it's at your side, and that's when you see them, figures in the distance. Another caravan, Poshteka, not part of your group, coming from the opposite direction. The two groups approach slowly, carefully, like dancers unsure if this is a duel or a duet. Then a hand raised, a greeting. The caravans meet, and for the first time in days, there is laughter, soft, low, respectful. Stories are exchanged, nothing loud, no boasting, just breath between friends. They swap news: which roads are safe, which winds turned strange, which villages offered cocoa without asking for jade. Then the moment comes. A whistle is produced, this one shaped like a spiral shell, carved in clay, painted in turquoise pigment. Not a scream whistle, not a frog croak. This one hums. A merchant blows it gently. It sounds like a sigh sung through a canyon. Everyone bows their heads. Ixicatl is honored. The groups part again. No ceremony, no goodbyes. The wind will carry the rest. And you continue walking, your breath now steady, your limbs looser, your thoughts scattered like petals on a breeze. You've never felt more awake or more peaceful, because here on the plain, with nothing between you and the sky, you remember the most important lesson of all. Not all gods demand attention. Some just want you to move. The sky begins to dim, not dramatically, but with the slow gold-bronze fade that tells your body it's time to slow down. The shadows stretch long across the plain, and even the wind seems to soften. Switching from conversation to lullaby, the Poshteka continue walking, though now their destination is in sight, a low village nestled against a distant ridge, barely visible but unmistakable in its silhouette. You can just make out the shapes of banners fluttering, fabric dyed with spirals, feathers and geometric sunbursts. This is a trade stop, yes, but also a ritual station. Tonight, the wind will be honored. This village is known as Tlamimilco, a place where the wind lands. In myth, it's said to be one of Echikedl's resting places. Not a temple, not a shrine, just a pause. Even wind must rest. As the Posheka near, villagers emerge. Not many, just a few elders, a few children, and a woman with a reed fan in one hand and a pouch of flowers in the other. No one rushes. This is not a dramatic reunion or a bustling market. It is deliberate, like a wind that arrives on time. The first act is not trade, but acknowledgement. Each Posheka bows, each villager offers a single breath into their palm and releases it skyward. This is the welcome. The wind shifts gently, stirring the hair of everyone present. That's the reply. Then comes the offering. The Posheka kneel near a circular stone platform at the village center. In the middle is a small brazier, not for heat, for smoke. They place bundles of fragrant herbs, copal, wild mint, crushed marigold. One merchant adds a single quetzal feather. The villagers light it, the smoke rises, and the wind receives it. There's a silence that follows, not empty but full. Like everyone is waiting to see if Echikedl accepts. And when the breeze curls in a gentle arc and lifts the smoke, not away, but up, everyone exhales, accepted. This isn't a festival, it's a ritual exchange. The Posheka will stay the night. At dawn, they'll move on. But for now there is food, flat maize cakes with honey, chili mashed with cocoa, and songs. Not loud songs, wind songs. 3 villagers sit on mats with drums between their knees, not for pounding, but for whispering rhythms. One plays a hollowed turtle shell with the tips of his fingers. Another begins to blow on a reed flute. The third hums a note so low, it barely vibrates, but you feel it in your spine, and above it all the breeze. It threads through the music, stirs the edges of woven cloaks, whistles faintly through roof beams like an unseen flute player. This is how Echikedl is invited into gatherings. No summoning, just welcome. The Posheka sit in a wide circle. They share stories, not of conquest or wealth, but of movement, where they came from, what winds carried them, what winds delayed them. Each story starts the same way. The wind told me. One merchant shares how his journey was delayed by 3 days due to sudden gusts in a mountain pass, but the delay made him miss a raid that destroyed the village he would have passed through. Echikedl, he says, knew what he didn't. Another tells of a wind that scattered his cocoa beans during a storm. He chased them down the hill, only to find a new path that led to a trade partner he'd never met before. They now exchange jade for dye twice a year. Historians often dismiss these tales as coincidences, dressed in divinity. But the Posheka don't. For them, Echikedl is not metaphor. He's memory, he's warning, he's invitation. And so, even when the night grows cold and stars begin to prick the sky, no one raises their voice. The fire crackles, the flute plays soft, and the wind, still curious, still present, rustles the palm leaves above. Before bed, a final ritual. The Posheka each take a small scrap of cloth, nothing fancy, just plain fiber, and whisper into it. Then they tie it to a reed stalk planted in a jar at the center of the circle. One by one, the strips lift in the breeze. These are called sigh flags. They don't carry prayers, they carry breath. They flutter all night, and if Echikedl visits, he'll read them like notes pinned to his robe. You lie down beside the soft edge of the gathering. Wrap yourself in your cloak and close your eyes. The last thing you hear before sleep claims you is the flutter of cloth and the faintest sound, a whistle, but not a warning, a lullaby. You wake before the sun. The sky still painted in pre-dawn grey. The village is quiet, wrapped in that sacred hush that belongs only to the last moments before morning. The Posheka are already stirring, moving with practiced calm. No yawns, no groan, just the slow unfolding of cloth bundles, the quiet tightening of sandal straps, the silent dismantling of camp, and the Psi flags. Gone, every single one. Not torn, not dropped, just gone. The reed stalk remains, but the breath offerings tied to it have been lifted. By Ehiket, no one says so. No one needs to. This is how the wind responds when it's truly listening. The villagers come to see the merchants off. They don't bring food, gifts or fanfare. Only a gust of wind sent down the narrow stone path that leads out of town, as if Ehikedel himself is pushing you onward. A blessing made of motion. You begin again. The final stretch of the journey lies ahead. There's a change in the way the Posheka walk now. Still quiet, still methodical, but something is rising in them. A readiness, a steadying of pace. Not because they're hurrying, but because they're about to enter the domain of decisions. Up ahead is the outer ring of Texcoco, one of the 3 great cities of the Aztec Triple Alliance. This isn't just a market hub. It's where information meets power, and Ehikedel, as you know by now, has a habit of drifting into important conversations. You pass a row of wind poles, tall wooden beams with fluttering feather bundles lashed at the top. They're not decorative. These poles were once placed by temple priests to observe which way the wind turned during holy days. If the breeze came from the north, it was seen as a warning. From the south, a good omen. One merchant stops and places his hand on one of the poles. The feathers twitch slightly, then still. He smiles and moves on. The city grows larger with each step. More signs of people, stone roads, water channels, flags, vendors already setting up stalls with maize, squash, honeycombs. Children run past with firewood. No one pays much attention to the Posheka, but make no mistake, they are noticed, always. In the markets of the great cities, Posheka held high status, not just as traders, but as messengers of the wind. People understood that they didn't just bring goods from afar, they brought whispers, news, shifts in power, sometimes even dreams. Historians still argue whether the Posheka deliberately spread political information, or if their stories simply grew into influence over time. Either way, they were listened to, and so was the wind that followed them. You reach the marketplace, a massive open-air expanse where rows of vendors fan out like petals, colors everywhere, textures, scents. But what catches your attention isn't any of this. It's a sound, a faint one, high-pitched, repeating, a whistle. But unlike any other, this one is low, constant, rhythmic, woven into the market itself. Not a scream, not a bird call, just breath. It comes from a trio of wind players standing on a raised stone near the market's edge. They wear masks, shaped like clouds, with long flowing cloaks that flutter dramatically in the morning air. Their instruments curve like question marks and emit tones you feel more than hear. This is ceremonial ambient, and Ehikedel loves it. The Posheka join the circle. They don't set up stalls. They never do. Their trade is invitation only. Those who know they've arrived will find them. And before any trade begins, they do what they always do. They listen. They sit, cross-legged, near a fire that hasn't yet been lit, and wait. Soon, envoys from various guilds arrive. Feather workers, potters, cocoa grinders, jade carvers, not to haggle, to speak softly, to ask what the Posheka have heard, what the wind has told them, not in exact words, but in delays, in storm, in new routes that had to be carved around fallen trees and rising rivers. Ehikedel speaks through inconvenience, through detour, through the unexpected. One merchant shares that the wind shifted oddly near the southern border, a place where days later word arrives that a rival city-state has begun building fortifications. Nothing confirmed, but the wind knew this is how the empire stayed one step ahead, because it listened. You sit in the wind, no longer a traveler, but a vessel. The breeze moves past your skin, and you wonder what it's trying to say. Maybe it's not about warnings, maybe it's not about secrets. Maybe a hikedal is simply saying you moved, and that was an. As the market fills with noise and smell and life, the Posheka remain still. Their role is not to dominate, it's to breathe, to shift, to observe, and when the time is right, depart. Just like the wind, afternoon melts slowly into evening, and the sky above Texcoco shifts to a dusky orange, with just enough breeze to send streamers fluttering over rooftops. The marketplace doesn't empty quickly. It slows down the way a bird folds its wings mid-air. Voices lower, flames are kindled, and merchants begin to pack their goods into reed baskets with muscle memory, so precise it almost feels like prayer. The Posheka are still. They sit in a quiet crescent beneath a wind wall, a curved, half-circle structure built to funnel and study airflow. They don't speak unless spoken to, and even then, their answers are slow, purposeful, as though consulting the breeze before every word. No trade yet. That comes last, because the final ritual is not about commerce, it's about closure. As the last light leaves the sky, the Posheka rise one by one and walk to the wind wall. Each carries a small object from the journey, a rock from the reed pass, a feather from the plains, a scrap of cloth once tied to a Sai flag. These are placed carefully on the stone ledge, offerings, not to a hikedal the god, but to a hikedal the witness. He saw it all, he moved with them, and now he must be thanked. Then comes the sound, not a scream, not a melody, something in between. The eldest Posheka produces a final whistle, shaped like a spiraled shell, painted with black and white lines that mimic movement. He holds it in both hands, closes his eyes and blows. The sound it makes is not loud, but it feels vast. It's the sound of a door opening somewhere far away. It's the sound of breath, caught just before speech. It's the sound of a hikedal, hearing. Around the market, those who know stop moving, not out of fear, but recognition. The wind has been spoken to, and he has answered. You feel it in your chest, not pressure, lightness, like the top layer of you has been lifted off, and the rest can finally rest. The Posheka lower the whistle. No one applauds, no one bows. There's no need. This is not performance, this is tradition. And then, without announcement, the market winds down. Trades are made in hushed tones. Cocoa beans exchange hands. Feathers, jade beads, dried fruits. But the real currency, the stories, the signals, the movement, has already passed. Night deepens. The wind calms. And you realize the journey has ended, not with a return but with an arrival. You have become part of the current now. Not an observer, a note in the wind's long invisible song. The Posheka sleep on mats arranged like petals again. No fire, just the breeze. You lie beside them. The stars blink into place above, and the wind rises once more, not to warn, not to rush, but to soothe. It wraps itself around your limbs, threads through your thoughts, and with a final exhale, carries you into the realm of sleep, because this story has no loud ending, just a soft breath. And the wind down, let yourself settle now. You've traveled far, not in distance maybe, but in time, and breath, and meaning. Your mind might still hum with spiraled stones, reed whistles, and feathered gods, who don't shout but simply shift the world with a whisper. Let that hum fade. Let the images blur. The Posheka are quiet now, sleeping on a wind-kissed plain. Their bundles are closed, their voices stored for tomorrow. Nothing left to trade, nothing more to carry. You don't need to carry anything either. Let the last of your thoughts drift like a sigh on the edge of sleep. If one returns, don't hold it. Just notice it and let it float. You're not in charge of movement here. You never were. The wind decides. Let your breath follow it. In and out, soft, steady. You may feel your body grow heavier now, sinking just slightly into the fabric beneath you. That's good. That means you're safe. The world doesn't need your attention for a while. The wind will carry things in your absence. It always does. Your eyes might close now, or they already have. Doesn't matter. You're not here to keep track. You're here to release. Let the stillness grow. Let the edges soften. There's nothing more to learn tonight. You've listened well. The wind is pleased. So rest now. Let it carry you. Let it turn the page. End of script. Sweet